Relax your hands, open your eyes. Nice. All right. So I want to begin by talking a little bit, defining what resilience is, and do a little brain science talk, and then we're going to go into practices. So resilience, there's a lot of talk about resilience right now, like trauma, resilience. Even little kids are talking about trauma and resilience. What does that mean? Resilience is your ability to go through something difficult, challenging, maybe traumatic, and then be able to come back okay at the end of it, right? That you actually get through it, and then you can come back to center and be okay, right? And difficult, challenging experiences can be a moment, a day, a week, an entire relationship, or a longer experience. And so resilience is that ability to go through something difficult and then kind of come back to yourself and be okay afterwards. Self-regulation is the practices you do so that you can come back to your center. Regulation of the nervous system is important because I don't know if you've noticed this, but your nervous system can kind of hijack you, right? Like you're feeling fine, something happens, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, kind of like maybe crying or sad or angry or upset. And you're like, I don't even know what happened. And so when we feel that chemistry of stress, is there somebody at the door? No. When we feel that chemistry of stress, that ability to navigate and kind of ride the waves of that chemistry is called self-regulation. There's also co-regulation, where we regulate together. And that's exactly one of the big pieces that's been missing during this pandemic. Because we've been so isolated or spending so much time alone, or just with one person, or just with our kids, then we're taking care of them, right? That we don't have that ability to laugh and be in joy and dance and go eat at our favorite restaurants and co-regulate. So co-regulation is important. So I'm so happy that some of us are able to be together, and then you at home are still together with us. We're co-regulating right now. And you can tell that that's important because you've maybe experienced when someone else is freaking out, you can feel it in your own body, right? We share collective nervous system, collective consciousness. So some people who are really grounded and centered in themselves can help us feel better, right? We just come up to a person and we're like, I just really like how I feel when I'm with this person. And then sometimes there's someone who's just kind of always a little stressed out, and it can trigger our anxiousness, our stress, right? So that's the downside of co-regulation, is that we really do, our nervous systems communicate. It's called neuroception. Like as soon as we are in closer with another human, our nervous system is reading them. It's called neuroception, right? Sometimes you just get a good feeling about somebody. Sometimes you get a really not good feeling about somebody. Trust that. It's not judgment. It's discernment. Your nervous system is going, this person maybe isn't right for me right now. It doesn't mean they're not a good person. It just means that maybe the state that they're in isn't good for your nervous system right now, right? So it's not judgment, it's discernment. And your nervous system is constantly reading. And the term is neuroception, right? It's like the perception of your nervous system. So all of those things are happening. And for us to be resilient, for us to be able to go through difficult things and be okay on the other side, we need self-regulation skills. We need to have practices that we can do when we get in a bath of stress hormones, so that we can kind of ride that and not go down the dark tunnels that the stress chemistry wants to take us down, right? So for today, we're going to talk a little bit about what that stress chemistry is and does. and learn some ways to navigate that. That's our beginning. And the beautiful thing is that actually what we're finding scientifically is that yoga is like the ultimate self-regulation, resilience-building practice. It's why we love it. And it's why when I was running a yoga studio, sometimes I felt like I was running a mental health clinic. Because like people get attracted to yoga because it helps you to be in your body and in the present moment in a way that a lot of other things don't do in our lives. So yoga is like the perfect, magnificent, but like plethora of tools and skills for self-regulation and to build resilience in your nervous system. Okay? So stress chemistry, for our purposes today, stress chemistry leads us into fight or flight, or sympathetic nervous system, or an activated nervous system, right? So stress chemistry, the kind of main one that we've all heard of is called cortisol. But there's actually like 1,200 chemicals that are released. 12, some studies say 1,400 chemicals. Not just cortisol, it's not just adrenaline, it's like 1,200. That is a bath of chemistry running through your body. And so our brains are designed to look for danger, react to it, and then get over it. But modern life is just chronically stressful, right? Modern life is chronically stressful. And so what can happen is we end up kind of having this little bath of stress chemistry going through our bodies kind of all the time. And then throughout the day, stresses can kind of stack until we get to a point where we're kind of up here. And then we get in the car and the car doesn't start. Or we go to pull out of work and someone cuts us off and road rage becomes real, right? It's like, oh my God, right? I just can't take it anymore, right? Because we've been like building this stress chemistry throughout the day and then for the long term. So it's important to understand that stress chemistry, when you're in fight or flight, your body is being told to move. Your body's being told to run or kick ass, right? Fight or flee. If you are sitting at a desk and you're having a difficult interaction with your boss or coworker or on a bad Zoom meeting or something like that, and you have to sit still, then you're shutting down your normal response to the stress. And that creates tension in our muscles that over time can lead to what I've seen in my work for the last 30 years, chronic low back pain, chronic headaches, shoulder issues, knee problems, hip problems. And I find like when I'm working with someone on a table, the other day I was like, wow, I feel like I'm massaging rage in this person. Like they are just so guarded and mad. I can feel that. Right? And so if we don't process that stress chemistry and we just keep adding to it throughout the day or with our lives, and we don't have good tools to work it through, then it just keeps stacking. And what's really interesting is that then your brain needs to identify the cause of all that cortisol. Your brain is looking around the room, looking around your life, going, what is the purpose of all this cortisol? Why is this person, this body wanting to run or kick ass? And so if you're in your home and there's nothing immediately dangerous around you, your brain's going to start filing through and find the last person that hurt your feelings. Or find that bad relationship from 10 years ago that all of a sudden you're ruminating about again and getting angry. And then adding more chemistry to the bath. Does that make sense? Right? Your brain is like, I need to explain what all this business is going on. So I'm going to find it. And now I'm going to be mad at you, right? Or your dog, poor dog, like they just wanted to go out and pee, and you're like, what is, you need so much from me, right? Like our brains will look, and we become overreactive. And what's really interesting to me is that in studies, when they look at brain scans, excitement and anxiety look the same. Excitement and anxiety light up the same parts of the brain. That's very interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting. And recently, I had a situation. I was house sitting, and there was suddenly no water, and then there was suddenly like a big mess, and I was trying to figure out, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a big old rush of stress chemistry, because I got to deal with this, and I don't know what's going on, right? And I was like, how exciting. I chose to frame it like, this is going to be exciting, because I didn't want to add more anxiousness to the experience. And so when we are in that anxiety or anxiousness or excitement, that alone can become addictive. That chemistry can become addictive. And it's often why people who have had a lot of trauma or traumatic experiences that they've not healed from tend to be like big risk takers. They want to go ride their motorcycle on the parkway really fast, or they want to go like jump out of airplanes or go skiing. They maybe take a lot of risks to feel alive because they're used to running at such a high level of anxiousness and chemistry in their bodies. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, right? Or they've suppressed their feelings so much that it takes something really extraordinary so that they can feel alive. So it becomes a choice at some point. Do we choose the excitement? Do we choose to align with people who bring up intensity in our emotions and in our bodies and our feelings? Or can we choose boring? Can we choose calm? Can we choose ease? And it can feel, making that transition from rolling fast and hard in the excitement and the intensity, it can feel a little boring at first. And it's often why people who are in a relationship with an abusive person, and that could be their boss or their partner or their parent or their child, often won't leave the relationship, or they try to find another relationship and they meet a nice person and they're like, I'm not just so bored, right? Because we get used to a high level of excitement and intensity. So just knowing that, I think, is helpful. Like, oh, actually, I could choose boring, because then boring actually becomes calm and actually becomes peace and feels really, really good. And so one of the things that happens when we get stuck in that crazy stress chemistry bath, as I said, our brains are kind of looking for something to react to or be mad about, right? And it's looking for those threats. And one of the things that we need to feel is welcome. Like, we're hardwired to need to feel welcome. That's why FOMO is real. Like, we have FOMO because our brains are literally hardwired to feel welcome, because in like early human times, if you weren't welcome and if you were ostracized and kicked out of your tribe, it was certain death. You would die. So we look on people's faces to feel welcome. We want to feel welcome. And if we don't, that's scary. And so I'm just going to share a little story, and then we're going to do some practice. So there was a woman in my life that I really tried for a long time to be friends with. And we're in a lot of the same circles, but she's just intense. She stirs things up and is challenging, not just for me. And I tried to be understanding. And she would give me a lot of attention because she wanted my attention and my friendship. And at some point, I called her and we had a conversation. And I was like, what I said, I was teaching a class, and I really didn't think it was appropriate for her to be in this particular class. And I said, I just want to understand why you signed up for this class, because I'm holding a container, and it doesn't really feel appropriate. And she was like, you need to calm down. And I was like, what? And she's like, you need to take some breaths and calm down, because you're screaming at me. And I was like, wow, I feel fine. I feel calm. And the communication, she was like, I'm going to give you a chance. You take a couple breaths and then you talk to me nicely. And I was like, wow, okay. Now, fortunately, I had a person in the room with me, so I was able to check in with them afterwards, because I was like, maybe I misinterpreted, because I was feeling a little anxiousness about conversing with this person. And they were like, you did a great job. You were totally calm, right? But what happened was, what I triggered in her was her fear of not being welcome. And so that triggered a huge rush of cortisol and chemistry in her brain. And then her brain interpreted my communication as interrogating, screaming, yelling at her. Like, you should have seen the texts that came in that day. Like, I was fine, Kat, but you freaked out and lost it. And I was like, wow, it's so not who I am, first of all. And I even had a witness. And she was like, I don't care what your witness says. They didn't hear my side of the conversation. I'm like, but they heard mine. They would have known if I was yelling, But that's how tricky. I tell you that story because that's how tricky our brains can be. If we are in stress chemistry, if we have, are triggered into that, we misinterpret other people's actions and words. And if we're living in a high level of that stress chemistry all the time, we become more and more and more easily reactive. So it really becomes our job in our lives to learn these self-regulation practices so that we can be more resilient. And if we get knocked off, we can go, oh, whew, that felt kind of bad, but I'm okay, right? And come back to that state of ourselves, to be resilient like a rubber band, so that we can come back to a place where we feel centered and grounded and in a good place. And so with meditation and yoga practices, Harvard did a study where they had people meditate for 8 weeks. And what they found was that the gray matter in their brains, which is the stuff that all the messages get sent through, basically, the gray matter in their brains significantly increased. So they were able to think more clearly. And the gray matter around the alarm system in their brains significantly shrank, so that they weren't as hypervigilant or highly reactive. So next week, we're going to talk about Polyvagal Theory, because there's a lot of talk and misunderstanding about that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, how can we reduce our alarm system so we're not walking around like this woman, a little trigger, and she lost it. And it really ended any chance of our friendship. I was like, I don't even feel safe with you, because I never know when you're going to go off the handle, right? Our brains are so tricky. And then what happens is that has a direct effect on our bodies. It has a direct effect because it makes our muscles tighten and tense. So sometimes when you need to calm down, right, which nobody in the history of calming down ever calmed down by being told to calm down, right? You're So sometimes calming down means you need to speed up first. You need to process that cortisol and to recognize that that's happening in your body, so that you can start doing this breathing that we're about to do, and take the mudra that we're about to do to first shut down the brain chemistry wheel, so that you'll already have released some chemistry. It's already happened, and it's going to take a few minutes for that chemistry to move through. but you can stop adding more of the stress hormones to that chemical bath. Does that make sense, right? So it becomes like awareness is your friend. Like, oh, I'm aware that I'm gripping the steering wheel, or I'm running really fast, or I'm thinking, or I'm pissed off at my ex from 10 years ago, right? So, okay, maybe that was me. No. Okay, so I'd like you to, we're going to start with Adi Mudra. Adi Mudra, it means first. It's the first mudra, and it's known to calm the nervous system and reduce cortisol levels in the body. And it's the first mudra that a baby can take. So what you do is you take your thumbs and you fold them into the center of your palms, and then you wrap your fingers around the thumbs. And then you relax your hands in your lap. And notice that maybe immediately your breath comes down to the belly. Because belly breathing is a signal to your nervous system that you feel safe. When you don't feel safe, your breath goes up high in the body. So the breath is the bridge. The breath is a way that we can help control the nervous system a bit, guide it back into a calmer place. And Adi Mudra helps us to do that. So we're just going to sit here for a moment. Adi Mudra, sitting up well, and breathing nice and big in the belly. Let your belly get really free as you inhale. The only effort is keeping the breath down in the belly.